Canon just announced the Canon R5C, and it's better than we hoped, which is not something we're used to saying from Canon. So in this video, I'm gonna just kind of react to this camera and tell you my thoughts as a C70 shooter and an EOS R shooter, and what I think this camera means for the future of content creation. Hey there, my name is Herrinton. I am a content creator, filmmaker based here in Richmond, Virginia, and I am really excited to talk about this camera. If you missed it, basically what Canon announced today is the R5C, which is arguably the most ideal and perfect hybrid camera, like the hybrid camera that we've always wanted. It has two different modes that it operates in and a dial on top dedicated specifically to switching back and forth between the two modes. And when you switch into video mode, you essentially get the exact same menu system and operations that you would find in a C70 or a C300 Mark III, any of the newer, more modern Canon cinema cameras. And then when you turn the dial mode into photo mode, you essentially get the same exact stills menu and, interface experience that we've come to know and love with the R5 and the R6 and even, the EOS R to some degree. So essentially what you have is two cameras in one. For a long time, we have been making video work on these stills cameras. And even though the capabilities in terms of the codecs and the quality and those types of things have increased over the years, specifically with, the R5 and the R6, moving up to 10-bit 422 and, 8K with the R5 and all that stuff, we've still always been managing and working with these cameras from the menus and the operations of a stills camera. But with the R5C, all of that changes. Now, it's not a perfect replacement for the C70, but it is basically a perfect replacement for the R5. The only thing that you're really going to be losing from a photography standpoint is the in-body image stabilization that you find in the R5 is not present in this camera, but basically everything else in terms of stills functionality, you're going to find here. So for a photography standpoint, we don't really have to even think, talk, or worry about really anything with this camera, because if that's what you need, if you need the functionality of the R5, minus the in-body image stabilization, which I don't even think is that necessary or important for photography, then this is going to cover you for photography. So let's talk about the video side. So what I think we need to talk about when it comes to the R5C is two different things. How does it differ from the R5 in terms of video capabilities, and how does it differ from the C70? Because it's essentially what it's become is you have a switch between C70 mode and R5 mode, but it's not exactly the C70. So what are the differences? So let's start with the things that you're going to be gaining. So if you're coming from the R5 to the R5C, in terms of video, you're going to be gaining things like false color, waveform monitoring, peaking, zebras, all the same stuff that you're going to find, again, in the menu system of the C70, you're not going to have access to. You're going to be gaining customizable buttons. All the buttons on this camera are now completely customizable, just like you find on all the cinema cameras. And they actually have two different purposes. So when you're in photo mode, the button will do one specific thing. When you're in video mode, you can program it to do something completely different. One big thing that you're going to gain in the R5C that you don't have in the R5 is going to be active cooling. We all know what happened with the R5 in terms of the cooling situation. And now, yes, they have fixed a lot of those issues with some firmware updates from the initial launch, which was a catastrophe, but it still has overheating issues and you still can't record for, unlimited amounts of time in 8K and some 4K modes and things like that. But with this new fan, theoretically, you should be able to record indefinitely. Now, when it comes to recording options for this camera, there are a lot of details when it comes to this, but basically you can shoot up to 8K, 60 frames per second, which is crazy. Now, at those 8K modes and in RAW, there are some small nuances to how you can record and things like that. In some of the 8K modes, you lose power to the lens if you're only operating on battery power. Basically, the power draw from the battery, because it uses the same battery from the R5, isn't going to give you enough power to power the camera to record 8K 60 and power the autofocus for the lens and things like that. So you're going to lose electronic connection to your lens unless you're plugged into an external power source. Now Canon is going to sell I'm not sure if it's going to come in the box or they're going to sell a regular like plug into the wall, plug into the camera type adapter, but you can also run this off of certain USB Type-C battery banks as well. So you have some different options in terms of powering the camera so that you can use autofocus. If you use cinema lenses or anything like that that don't have manual focus, it's not going to make much of a difference to you, but that is just something worth noting. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that you're not going to get on this camera that you find in the C70. In the R5C, you're not going to find C-Log2, which I think is crazy. I don't really understand why Canon is so particular about giving C-Log2 to all of their different cameras. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. This camera is only $1,000 less than the C70. You would think that they would just put C-Log2 in there to have it in there. I don't know if there's a reason why. I mean, it's shooting the same codecs. I don't think there's any technical reason why they shouldn't be able to include C-Log2 in this camera, but regardless, it's not going to be there. No built-in ND filters, obviously just due to the size of the body. You're not going to have built-in XLRs. However, there is a top handle type situation that you can buy for the R5C that will give you XLR. So if that's the only thing holding you back, there is a solution for that. The physical body itself is slightly thicker than the R5, but the overall body is obviously smaller than the C70. So I don't know if that's really a pro or a con. Depends on which direction you're coming from. But for me as a C70 user, coming down to the R5, it would be significantly smaller and lighter. One thing you are going to be missing from the R5C that you have in the C70 is the dual gain output sensor. What's one of my favorite things about the C70 is just how clean the shadows are. Even if you don't nail your exposure perfectly in C-Log2, you can still raise the image up in post. You don't have to worry too much about crazy noise in the shadows like you used to have to on things like the C200 and the C300 Mark II, all that sort of stuff. So you're not going to have that. However, the R5C is full frame. So depending on what your priority is, there's pros and cons, I guess, but whereas the C70 is a Super 35 sensor, the R5C is full frame. And then I guess just to talk about again in the downsides, I guess there is no in-body image stabilization. That would be nice. That is one thing I really do wish my C70 had. So I guess that's, you're not really losing anything if you're coming from the C70 because you don't have that anyway. But if you're coming from the R5 and you rely on that IBIS a lot, you're not going to have it here. I don't know. It is nice to have. It is nice to be able to shoot handheld and have that in-body image stabilization to help offset and to run handheld and things like that. But I think that the dual functionality that you're gaining and the fan, I would much rather have the fan than the IBIS. If I had to pick between the two, I would choose the fan every time. So thankfully Canon did as well. So I can leave some links down below to some YouTube videos where people actually have, hands-on with the cameras and can share some more experiences shooting with it, things like that. I obviously can't provide you with that. But as somebody who has been going back and forth between the, Canon cinema ecosystem and the Canon stills ecosystem for a long time, since 2014. I think I bought my C100 in 2014, and I've been using like the 5D Mark III and the C100. I used both of those for a long time. I've been using the EOS R here since 2019, and I've been using the C70 for over a year now. And as somebody who's kind of been back and forth in both of these worlds, this is really exciting because the only real downsides to me that matter in terms of the R5C that I'm losing from my C70, if I had both in my hands and I had to choose one for a shoot, is going to be built-in ND filters and built-in XLRs. Now, the built-in XLRs, there is a solution for that in that top handle, and I don't use built-in XLRs for every single shoot that I do. The next thing that you're losing is the built-in ND filters, but I already own the EOS, the RF to EF mount adapter that has the built-in variable ND filter, which works great. Now, is it as good as built-in NDs? No, because it is hard to take the ND off completely. There's not a great solution for that. But if I'm outside and I know that I'm in a situation where I'm going to need ND filters, which honestly, I almost am always shooting with ND filters. Right now, I don't have it turned on, but I have my light set to 1% power, and I had to go down to 400 ISO because it's actually too bright. So almost always when I'm shooting, I'm using some sort of an ND when it comes to video. So having the ND adapter sort of solves that problem. Now, it's not perfect. And I still do love built-in ND filters. But if those are the only two real compromises that I have, and then battery life. Battery life is probably the biggest thing, because one of the best things about the C70 is that the batteries are really big and they last for a really long time. This R5C is going to chew through batteries. I can tell you that right now. Now, obviously, we're going to need to wait and see for the official reviews and overheating tests and all those different things. So we don't want to jump to conclusions too early. But if you're somebody out there who does video and photo in any sort of capacity, and right now I don't honestly do a ton of photography in my like day-to-day workflow. I'm shooting 90% of the work that I do is video, and the C70s are perfect for that. The big question I have honestly between the C70 and the R5C that could potentially sway me in that direction would be the autofocus, because one thing I have not loved about the C70 is the autofocus isn't as good as my EOS R. And I know that the autofocus on the R5 and the R6 are even better than the EOS R, but I don't know how to describe it really, because the autofocus on the C70 is not bad. The face tracking, like in this scenario, where I'm sitting down, well lit, this type of an environment with the face track, it works great. But in other scenarios where I'm using it on a gimbal and things like that, it's just not quite as accurate and reliable as I found with the R and the R5 and the R6. So if the autofocus on the R5C is as good as the R5 in certain scenarios, that would be huge for me. And like I said, you're not really compromising a ton in those other areas, especially for things where you're on the go. Can I fit the C70 in my backpack? Yes, I can fit it in my backpack with a lens. It's not really that big. It's not really that heavy. But what I also need to bring in that scenario is a stills camera. So if I'm going to go on a big epic hike and I want to be filming and doing stuff like that, I'm probably also going to take some stills. So I'm either going to have to bring two cameras, and then I can switch the lenses back and forth, or I'm going to need another lens for the stills camera if I want to be kind of going back and forth relatively quickly and things like that. But the ability to grab one camera that's a little bit thicker than this, but about this size, and get almost all the functionality of my C70, plus being able to take all the stills that I could ever want. Gosh, that's pretty awesome. One thing to note that I did see in B&H's video that they talked about is when you do switch from photo mode into video mode, there is a bit of a delay of maybe like 3 or 4 seconds, it looked like in their video. Now they have a pre-production model, so who's to say what's going to actually happen when the full production model comes out. But because it has to switch so many things over and completely reset the whole menus and basically like reset the whole camera, it's not instantaneous. So if you're thinking you can go from like I'm in video mode and then like bam, switch into photo mode and it instantly switches like that, that's not going to be the case. All right, so that's just my kind of initial thoughts and impressions and sort of brain dump about this camera. It really is blowing my mind. It is very, very exciting, the possibilities that come along with this camera and the small form factor and all those types of things. And I really do think it represents the future of where we're going in content creation right now, and just the way that we as creatives need to be able to shoot really high quality stills and really high quality video. And now we have a way to do that without really making any compromises. And if we do, they're very, very minor compromises for the huge upside that we get with this camera. So I'm very excited for it. I'm hoping to get my hands on it. We'll see. I plan on getting one eventually. How soon that's going to be, we'll see. And I do want to make more videos about the C70. So if you're out there and you're watching this and you have questions about the C70, please leave those down below. I can make a ton of content. I've been using this camera literally daily for over a year now, and I have lots to say about it. So I'm going to make some C70 content for sure. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like content like this. I've got big plans for 2022 to make lots more content for filmmakers and content creators and people like that who are out in the world making content on a regular basis and need to know about the latest tools at our disposal. So make sure you subscribe down below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.